In a small, bustling town where everyone knew each other's business, Clara had built a reputation as the town's go-to mechanic. She wasn't just good with engines. She had a rare combination of patience, skill, and kindness that made people trust her with anything that had wheels. But life, as Clara often mused, had a strange way of testing even the kindest hearts. One sunny afternoon, a young boy arrived at her garage with a battered bicycle, the kind of bike that seemed to have been through 100 adventures and 1,000 mishaps. The boy's father was a soldier, stationed far from home, leaving his son to navigate life's small battles alone. Clara, noticing the boy's hesitant smile and tired hands, didn't hesitate. She rolled up her sleeves and set to work, fixing the bike with precision and care. She tightened the gears, polished the handlebars, and even added a small charm to the chain, a silent wish for the boy's safety while his father was away. What Clara didn't anticipate, however, was that this simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. Within hours, the story of the mechanic who had gone out of her way for a soldier's child spread across the town like wildfire. But not everyone was pleased. Clara's employer, a strict and profit-driven shop owner, saw her generosity as a distraction, even a threat. In a decision that stunned the town, she was fired the very next day, leaving her with nothing but her tools and her principles. Yet sometimes, when the world seems harshest, fate has a way of tipping the scales. And in Clara's case, that tipping scale came in the most unexpected form. 17 millionaires, all somehow touched by her selfless act, appearing at her doorstep, ready to change her destiny forever. Clara had always believed in the simple power of helping others. Ever since she was a child, she remembered the countless afternoons spent tinkering with her father's old tools, learning the intricacies of engines, chains, and wheels. Her small fingers smeared with grease and oil. That early exposure to mechanics wasn't just a hobby. It was her way of making sense of the world, a language she could speak fluently while others fumbled with words. Over time, her talent grew, and her reputation as a skilled mechanic spread throughout the town. People came to her not just for repairs, but for the care and attention she poured into every task. She had a knack for understanding not only machines, but the people who owned them. There was something in her eyes, a quiet empathy that made anyone feel at ease. Whether they were dropping off a motorcycle or a rusty old bicycle, it was on an unusually warm afternoon, when the event that would change her life began. A small boy, no older than 10, wheeled his battered bike into her garage, wobbling slightly with every push. Clara noticed immediately that it wasn't just the bike that looked worn. The boy carried himself with a hesitancy, a subtle weight in his posture that hinted at struggles far beyond his years. He introduced himself quietly, almost shyly, and explained that his father was a soldier, stationed far away, leaving him to navigate everyday challenges alone. Clara's heart went out to him instantly. She could see the mixture of pride and anxiety in his eyes, the pride of holding his father's legacy, the anxiety of managing alone. Without a moment's hesitation, she invited him to set the bike down and took a careful look at the damage. The chain was rusty, the brakes squeaked loudly, and the gears slipped with every push as she worked. Clara asked the boy gentle questions about his father, about school, about his favorite colors and hobbies. Trying to keep the conversation light while she meticulously repaired the bicycle, she sanded the chain until it gleamed, adjusted the brakes so they responded smoothly, and replaced the worn grips on the handlebars. With each twist of her wrench and each adjustment, she felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing she was restoring not just a bicycle but a little boy's sense of confidence and pride. She even went a step further, slipping a small charm onto the chain, a tiny token she had kept for years, a good luck charm that her father had given her when she was his age. She didn't say anything about it to the boy. It was just her way of wishing him safety and resilience. While his father was away, the boy watched her work with wide-eyed fascination, occasionally asking questions about the tools she used or why certain parts needed careful handling. Clara explained patiently, demonstrating the delicate balance between precision and intuition required to fix a bike properly. It was an ordinary act, something she had done countless times before, but in that moment, it carried a deeper meaning. The boy's eyes lit up as he took the bike for a small test ride in the garage, wobbling at first and then gaining confidence with each turn of the pedals. Clara felt a swell of pride, a quiet joy that made the grease-stained hands and aching back feel entirely worthwhile. What Clara didn't anticipate, however, was the scrutiny that came from her employer. Her boss, a man who measured success in profits rather than kindness, had been observing from the corner of the garage. He believed that time spent on acts of generosity, no matter how small, was time taken away from the business. Clara's meticulous care for the boy's bicycle, the extra minutes she spent polishing, adjusting, and even personalizing the repair, struck him as inefficiency, a distraction from the tasks he considered truly important. The tension between them had been simmering for months, a slow friction that Clara had mostly ignored, believing that integrity and skill mattered more than arbitrary rules. But on that day, her employer's patience reached its limit. He called Clara aside, his voice sharp, tinged with irritation. He questioned why she had taken so long on such a simple repair, why she had added unnecessary touches that, in his view, had no business being part of a mechanic's work. Clara tried to explain that it wasn't just about fixing the bike, it was about helping the boy, making him feel capable and cared for while his father was away. Her words fell on deaf ears. He accused her of neglecting her duties, of putting sentiment above efficiency, and made it clear that her actions were unacceptable. Clara stood her ground as best she could, explaining that compassion and craftsmanship were not mutually exclusive, but he would not hear it. Within hours, Clara was informed that she was being let go. The news hit her like a sudden storm. She felt a mix of disbelief and anger, but beneath it all was a quiet, stubborn sense of pride. She had done what she believed was right, and she would not apologize for it. Packing her tools and personal belongings, Clara left the garage with a heavy heart, knowing that the path ahead would be uncertain. The streets she walked felt different that evening. The familiar sights of her town somehow sharper, as if echoing the injustice she had just endured. Yet in her chest, a small flame of hope continued to burn, fueled by the knowledge that she had acted with integrity, that she had helped someone who needed it without expecting anything in return. The story of that day, as simple as it seemed to Clara, was about to take on a life of its own. The boy returned home, excitedly recounting the experience to his mother over dinner, describing in vivid detail the kindness of the mechanic who had repaired his bike and given him a sense of pride. His mother, touched by the care shown, mentioned it to neighbors, friends, and eventually posted a short account on social media, highlighting not only Clara's skill, but her generosity. The post quickly gained attention, drawing comments and shares from people who admired such acts of kindness in a world that often seemed harsh and self-serving. Clara, meanwhile, had tried to settle into the quiet rhythm of unemployment, unsure of what would come next. She spent her days tinkering with old bicycles she had collected over the years, repairing them out of habit and love rather than necessity, unaware that the ripple effect of her good deed was growing stronger each day. People who read the story online began to reach out, some offering small gestures of support, others sharing their own experiences of similar kindness. The narrative of the mechanic who prioritized empathy over efficiency resonated widely, painting Clara as a symbol of integrity and selflessness in a society that often rewarded the opposite. Her firing, which initially felt like a crushing blow, slowly transformed into a catalyst for something far greater. What had seemed like the end of her professional life became the beginning of a journey she could never have anticipated. Clara's actions had set in motion a chain reaction, one that proved that even a single act of kindness, performed without expectation, could have consequences far beyond her imagination. Every adjustment she made on that small bicycle, every thoughtful touch, every moment she spent patiently teaching the boy about the gears and brakes, was about to become the reason why her story would spread, why it would touch hearts far beyond her quiet town, and why her life was on the verge of an extraordinary turn. The story of Clara's act of kindness spread in ways she could never have imagined. It began with a single post on social media, a short note written by the boy's mother describing how Clara, the local mechanic, had gone out of her way to fix her son's bike, adding little touches of care that made the boy feel special and supported while his father was away on duty. The post was simple, heartfelt, and sincere, highlighting Clara's skills and her generosity without any hint of exaggeration. People immediately resonated with it, sharing it among friends, tagging neighbors, and commenting on the beauty of a selfless act in a world that seemed increasingly rushed and indifferent. Within hours, the story had reached hundreds of people, but the ripple effects were just beginning. As the post gained traction, local news outlets caught wind of the story, drawn not just to the tale of a mechanic helping a child, but to the drama of her subsequent firing. Headlines appeared online. Local mechanic fired after helping soldier's son in kindness costs Clara her job. The narrative was compelling, striking a chord with a broad audience. People empathized with Clara's dedication, the boy's vulnerability, and the injustice of a generous act being punished by an employer who failed to understand its value. Social media comments poured in from all corners, messages of support, encouragement, and outrage at the way Clara had been treated. Many shared stories of their own experiences with people who went out of their way to help others, creating a wave of relatability that amplified the reach of her story. Soon, local influencers began to notice, sharing the story with their followers, framing Clara as a symbol of selflessness and moral integrity. Some were drawn to the mechanics of her work, marveling at the precision and care she demonstrated, while others focused on the human aspect, the empathy she had shown to a child missing his father. Each share multiplied the exposure, and soon the story had transcended the small town and reached regional and even national platforms. Journalists, bloggers, and social commentators began writing about Clara, framing her as an example of what society often overlooks, the quiet heroes whose acts of kindness ripple far beyond their immediate surroundings. Amid the growing media attention, people began to reach out directly to Clara. Emails, social media messages, and even phone calls arrived from strangers expressing gratitude and admiration. Some offered words of encouragement, while others inquired if they could help in tangible ways, donating tools, offering mentorship, or suggesting freelance work opportunities. The sheer volume of attention was overwhelming at first. Clara, who had always preferred to work quietly and let her actions speak for themselves, found herself thrust into a spotlight she had never sought. Yet, the recognition was not just flattering, it was empowering. She realized that her commitment to kindness and excellence had created a network of people who valued those traits, and she began to see opportunities where she had once only seen obstacles. The narrative of Clara's firing also became a topic of social debate. People criticized her former employer for punishing compassion, questioning the priorities of businesses that valued profit over humanity. Opinion pieces and editorials argued that workplaces needed more people like Clara, individuals willing to go beyond the minimum, who understood the human element behind every task. This dialogue extended to corporate leaders, philanthropists, and everyday citizens, sparking conversations about integrity, empathy, and the sometimes unseen cost of generosity in a results-driven society. Clara's story became a case study for local universities and business programs, illustrating both the risks and the potential rewards of putting people first. While the attention was growing, Clara continued her work quietly, repairing bicycles and motorcycles in a makeshift home workshop she had set up. The influx of messages and offers made her reconsider her future. She received invitations from local organizations to speak at community events, and proposals from other shops asking if she would consider employment under fair and supportive conditions. Some of the offers were modest, but others were significant, hinting at partnerships or investments that could allow her to open her own shop. Clara, however, approached each offer with caution. Aware that her experience with her previous employer had taught her the importance of aligning values with opportunity, she did not want to rush. She wanted to ensure that any next step would allow her to continue her work with the same integrity and care that had defined her reputation. Meanwhile, the boy's story continued to amplify her visibility. People were drawn to the authenticity of his experience, the way he described Clara's attentiveness, her patience, and the small charm she had added to his bike. Videos and photos began circulating, some taken by neighbors who witnessed the repair, showing Clara adjusting gears, tightening bolts, and smiling gently at the boy's cautious test rides. These images struck a chord across social media, reinforcing the narrative of a mechanic whose talents were matched only by her heart. Influencers and media outlets highlighted these visual accounts, creating a viral sensation that further fueled public admiration. As her story continued to circulate, a group of philanthropists and entrepreneurs began discussing Clara's case privately. They were drawn not just to the viral nature of her story, but to the tangible example of how selflessness and skill could intersect in ways that inspired broad societal recognition. Clara had unintentionally become a symbol of a principle many valued but few actively practiced, that acts of genuine kindness, even small ones, could create opportunities far beyond their immediate context. These discussions set the stage for an unexpected turn in her life, one that would soon bring the attention of those with the resources to make a real difference, and would eventually lead to a series of events that Clara herself could never have predicted. Her story also began to influence the local community directly. Parents spoke to their children about Clara's actions, emphasizing the importance of helping others and demonstrating that generosity was not a weakness but a strength. Local business owners began reevaluating their policies, wondering if their emphasis on efficiency sometimes overlooked the human element. Clara's act had sparked a subtle cultural shift, prompting people to notice, appreciate, and emulate simple acts of kindness. It was no longer just the story of a mechanic fixing a bike. It had become a conversation about values, ethics, and the profound impact of individual actions in a connected world. Through all this, Clara remained grounded. She continued to repair machines, focus on the boy's well-being, and maintain the same patience and diligence that had defined her from the beginning. Yet, each message, each share, and each public acknowledgement reinforced the realization that her actions, however small in intention, were capable of resonating far beyond her immediate circle. She began to understand that true influence didn't always come from titles or wealth, but from integrity, dedication, and the courage to act according to one's principles. The day the 17 millionaires arrived at Clara's doorstep began like any other. She had woken early, poured herself a cup of coffee, and stepped into her modest home workshop, surrounded by half-repaired bicycles and scattered tools, ready to continue her work in quiet solitude. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting warm light across the grease-streaked floor. But there was a sense of anticipation in the air that Clara could not quite place. She had been aware of the growing attention her story had received online, the messages of support, the emails from strangers offering help, and the local news coverage praising her act of kindness. Still, she had never imagined that this attention would manifest in the form of a literal line of millionaires, waiting to meet her in person. It started with a knock at the door, a firm, deliberate series of taps that carried a weight unusual for the quiet street she lived on. When Clara opened the door, she was met by a man in a tailored suit, briefcase in hand, with an expression of both curiosity and admiration. Behind him, another man followed, carrying a portfolio, and behind him, another, until 17 distinct figures stood on her doorstep, each seemingly representing a different walk of life, a different industry, yet all united by a shared purpose. Clara blinked in disbelief, unsure if she was dreaming. As the first man introduced himself, he explained that he had read about her story online, was inspired by her courage, her skill, and her unwavering commitment to helping a child in need, and had come along with others to meet her personally. As introductions continued, Clara felt a mixture of awe and anxiety. The visitors were calm, professional, and attentive, but the sheer magnitude of the gathering left her slightly overwhelmed. Each millionaire spoke briefly about their admiration for her actions, emphasizing that her generosity and integrity had touched them deeply. They were not there to critique or patronize. They were there to understand, to connect, and, most importantly, to offer an opportunity for her to expand her impact in ways she had not yet imagined. Clara listened carefully, her hands clasped in front of her, trying to process the gravity of the moment. The conversations quickly shifted from formal introductions to discussions of possibility. Some of the millionaires represented investment firms. Others owned businesses in industries that ranged from automotive manufacturing to education, and a few were philanthropists with a focus on youth empowerment. They were unified by a single belief: Clara's talent, when combined with her moral compass, could become a force capable of influencing lives far beyond her small town. They presented ideas, proposals, and plans. But what struck Clara most was the sincerity behind each offer. These were not empty gestures designed for publicity. They were genuine attempts to provide her with resources, mentorship, and platforms to continue her work in mechanics and community service. One man, a well-known entrepreneur in the automotive industry, suggested she open a chain of workshops, designed not only to repair vehicles, but also to teach young people, particularly children of soldiers or single parents, the skills needed to care for machines and gain confidence in their abilities. Another, a philanthropist focused on youth programs, proposed funding, scholarships, and workshops that would allow Clara to mentor children nationwide. Each millionaire added a layer to the vision, expanding it from a local initiative into something that could potentially transform communities, giving countless children the same sense of pride and self-reliance that the soldier's son had experienced. As they spoke, Clara's initial disbelief gradually gave way to cautious excitement. She began to see the potential of what was unfolding, not just for herself, but for every child and family that could benefit from the kind of attention, care, and guidance she had shown the boy. The millionaire who had suggested a chain of workshops explained the logistical aspects: locations, funding, staff, and materials. The philanthropist added guidance on program design, ensuring that each workshop would maintain a focus on both technical skill and personal development. Others offered to connect Clara with networks of educators, business consultants, and media professionals who could help her amplify the message. Throughout the conversation, Clara remained grounded, asking questions and seeking clarification. She was wary of overcommitting or losing sight of the personal touch that had defined her work. The millionaires reassured her that their intention was not to impose their vision but to support hers. They emphasized that the core of their interest lay in her authenticity, her dedication, and the quiet strength she had demonstrated in helping the soldier's son. They wanted her to maintain control, to lead according to her principles, and to ensure that every step taken reflected the values that had earned their admiration in the first place. At one point, the conversation shifted to the boy himself. They had all been deeply moved by the story of how he had come to Clara's workshop, nervous and hesitant, and how she had patiently guided him through the repairs, offering encouragement and small tokens of reassurance. Each millionaire spoke about the importance of creating similar experiences for other children who might face challenges, emphasizing that Clara's approach was as much about building character and confidence as it was about fixing machinery. They discussed ways to document the workshops, share stories, and create mentorship programs that could reach children in cities and towns far beyond. Clara's immediate environment, the energy in the room, was palpable. Clara felt a sense of validation she had never sought but deeply appreciated. Her act, which had seemed small and ordinary to her, had catalyzed a movement. The millionaires, impressed not only by her skill but by her unwavering commitment to doing what was right, were offering her tools, resources, and connections that could expand her influence exponentially. Each proposal, each idea, each commitment of support seemed to form a mosaic, a larger picture of impact that Clara had never dared to imagine. Amid the discussions, Clara began to realize the true significance of the moment. She had been fired for an act of kindness, an injustice that had initially felt like a personal defeat. Yet, in that very act lay the catalyst for something extraordinary. The 17 millionaires represented more than just wealth or opportunity. They embodied the principle that integrity, empathy, and skill could draw attention and inspire action on a grand scale. They were here not to control her, but to empower her, to recognize that the choices she had made, the care she had shown, and the dedication she had maintained could now ripple outward to touch countless lives. As the meeting progressed, Clara started to envision a future she had never imagined for herself. She could see workshops filled with children, learning not only about machines but about perseverance, patience, and the importance of helping others. She imagined a network of mentors and volunteers inspired by her example, creating communities where generosity and expertise were valued equally. She considered how her small act of repairing a single bicycle could transform into a movement of empowerment, teaching children that even in challenging circumstances, one person's dedication could create lasting change. The millionaires continued to share ideas, each one building on the other's vision, their enthusiasm infectious. Clara felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, excitement, disbelief, and a growing sense of responsibility. She understood that this opportunity was not just about personal gain. It was about stewardship, about ensuring that the resources, connections, and platforms offered to her were used to expand the same kindness and integrity that had sparked their interest. Every question she asked was met with thoughtful answers. Every concern she raised was addressed with reassurance. They discussed logistics, potential obstacles, and ways to maintain quality and authenticity. Clara's heart raced as she realized that this was not just a fleeting moment of recognition, it was the beginning of something sustainable, something that could extend far beyond her small garage, far beyond her town, and perhaps even beyond her own lifetime.